the story of Mukunda in the ashram always surprised me when I would read again the autobiography. I just assumed, I guess, that ashrams were about meditation. So that was a very interesting story to start off his life just before he met his guru. And it's a good thing we consider that meditation is a big part of ashram living, because it's the oil in our lamps. It's the readiness to recognize and become aware within ourselves that we, in fact, are children of eternity. Swami Kriyananda says to, I need to stay in relation to this, okay. Swami says to us in relation to anything that we do, that we need to do it wholeheartedly. Our meditation, the work that we've been given, the inspiration that we receive, anything that we're doing, we need to put our whole heart into it. And why is this? You would think perhaps that, yes, this is something that would be said about your meditation, but it's said about all of life because it's a whole piece. So recently, I was very inspired by the stories that were coming through about the reopening of Notre Dame. Because what was so inspiring about what happened there in France was that after the fire, the shock of it all and the fact that so much was destroyed, the whole roof and the spire, everything came down. And you would think that that shock and sorrow would knock people for a loop. But Macron, the president of France, came right in and said, we are going to rebuild. This is going to be done in 5 years. We will not modernize. We will learn we will use the old techniques of when a cathedral was originally built, and we'll put it all back together. That was quite a statement, and yesterday was the opening and the gathering of world leaders, and it was extraordinary to see. I had been to Paris only once, a lifetime trip, a dream come true, in 1999. And I remember, except for the windows, that it was relatively dark. Well, you should see it now inside. It actually was really ready for a renovation. And no one expected it to start in that way. Let's take it all down and put it all back up. But it was ready for a renovation. It is so light in there. It showed pictures of the craftspeople taking what looked like Q-tips and getting the soot off every little crevice of all the artwork and the sculpture. They just did a magnificent job and brought it back to light. Now, a cathedral like that, I mean, it was built in the 1200s. And a cathedral like that needs tidying up every several decades. And it was actually, that was the cause of the fire. They were, in fact, working on sprucing it up a bit, and it caught fire. So it was ready to get a real facelift, and oh, is it gorgeous. And the other thing about it, the putting your whole heart into it, which was very moving, is that they drew craftspeople from all over the world. People who, in fact, one of the carpenters who came from the United States said that technique of how the roof was put together and how it was joined, that's been used all the way since the 12th century. That is the basic technique. There are new things being thought about, but that was the basic technique. Not only that, but they decided that they would use oak as was originally used. And so they went out into the forests and found they had to be a certain height, because this roof, had certain dimensions. It had to be a solid piece of oak. Anyway, all that was done with artisans from around the world. And it must have been such an amazing community experience for all those people for 5 years. And they truly put their whole hearts into it. In fact, one American woodworker said, well, in these 5 years, I've learned French. I have a woodworking business in Massachusetts, but I learned French. I've applied for French citizenship, and I just want to stay. And I think it's community. It's the power of community. It's the power of everyone working with their full energy and just putting everything they had into it. And this is what's being asked of us in our devotional practices, in our meditation practices, that we don't do it just on the run, that we don't do it when we're sleepy, that we do it when we're fresh and can put our whole heart, fill us with the devotion, the oil of devotion. And that's what will carry us to the experience of the Christ consciousness. The other inspiring thing about the cathedral is that, well, they had to raise a lot of money for it. And $62 million came from the U.S. And that's the tie there is with the U.S. and France. But they raised so much money to accomplish what they wanted to accomplish. They didn't have to skimp on anything, that they now have a little fund where they can take care of certain things that need to be done over the years. That's just full energy. It is so thrilling, and the beauty in that temple. The curious thing for me was to see that not many people were moved to. I've never heard the God word. I never heard anyone say, you looked at the glorious ceiling and you looked at all the paintings and you looked at the beautiful sculptures in these newscasts, but I never heard anyone use the word God. And I just felt like, how could you not feel that it was coming from something higher than just everything that was here? It was so magnificent, and it's a very tall ceiling. I mean, that was a innovation when it was built. There's an interesting aspect to how they wanted to remember in the structure this fire and this renovation. One thing was the man that Macron asked to lead the craftsmen in this project was a general. He was in the military, and he gave them a hard time at first, but they were young people. All these craftspeople from around the world were young people, and I think they just softened him a bit. So he got things done. He got them done on time. He had that 5-year thing ahead of him. It was he just put everything into it. And then about a month before it was finished and this opening was happening, he took a walk in the Pyrenees and died. Curious. He didn't get to see the finish. But in came his second in command, who was joyful and loving and expressive, and it must have meant to be. So one of the ways that they, I'm so into this, I hope you don't mind. Whoop. I'll get back on topic, I promise. One of the ways they acknowledged him was to carve his name and dates into one of the columns to acknowledge the work he had done. Another interesting thing that acknowledges the fire is that there is a beautiful pieta right in the front, behind the altar, but right in front, that's seen by everyone. And the hand of Christ is down like this. They left the melted iron in the hand, because that's what happened on the roof. That sturdy oak burned so hot that it melted the iron. And in fact, there was so much iron dust in the cathedral when they started that they had to wear protective masks. But you got to see that heartfelt work of restorers, of metal workers, of woodworkers cutting those oak trees in the old way to put them together so that they're not put together by nails and things. They're put together by the sheer force of the way they're constructed. Anyway, enough. If we put our whole hearts into the project of getting to experience eternity within, then we will be wise virgins. If we are lackluster in our practice, God is not a harsh God. God is a forgiving God. We will get reminded by the experiences of life, by hardships that come. We will get reminded that our meditation practice has to be reformed and strengthened. And so we go on this kind of a journey where, and we all know this, the wonderful feeling of being wholeheartedly meditating twice a day. It's glorious. And we all know the sorrow of being lackluster in our attempts, but we just never give up. And you know, the story of the 10 virgins was a story that I would use a lot in teaching meditation in the early years. I actually did not know what specific story it came from, but that sense that if you're not there, you miss it. I always use that for myself for meditation. I thought, that Christ consciousness is going to come down, and I'm not going to be there. I better be there. And that's how I sat on my cushion every day, twice a day, and wholeheartedly remembered the Virgin story. It's very instructive, good to remember. The whole idea of our relationship with God being the most important thing in our lives is interesting, because there was a monk who said to, let's see where I put this story. There was a monk who said to Master, okay, I'm just going to have to remember it. He said, Master, devotion is the most important thing, right? And Master said to him, devotion is the only thing. So that's what we need to remember. And it's a job we do for God, because God wants us back. God wants us awake. God wants our love. That's the only thing he doesn't have. So, and it brings us joy. That's where the joy comes from. The joy doesn't necessarily come from your personality. The joy doesn't come from even your life experiences, although many of them may be. But it comes from within. It comes from your practice. It comes from your contact with God. And I thought, while I was preparing, I thought of Brother Lawrence practicing the presence. And Brother Lawrence was a uneducated young man in the 1600s. This was before we even crossed out from Kali Yuga to Dwapara Yuga. This was deep, deep Kali Yuga. And there he was with no education. He had been a soldier in the war. And he thought, well, I don't know how to do much. I think I should go into a monastery and just give it a shot, see what I can do. And he was put in the kitchen. He said, that was the worst assignment I could possibly have gotten, because I was always breaking things and I didn't read, and he just had lots of things that he felt weren't right for him. But he didn't care about ritual, and he found he just couldn't learn it. He couldn't learn the prayers or do what was expected. So he decided within himself that what he would do is talk to God and be in connection with God about everything, about the cooking, about the cleaning of the dishes, about his grumbling self. He'd talk to God and get it all straightened out. And he said, I figured that whether or not I knew the rituals and the prayers didn't really matter as long as God and I were in contact. And to the point where he just became a saint. He became very saintly because that was all that was going on for him. He basically saw the process as resigning. And I like this word. This is a wonderful word to describe what we need to do. Resigning ourselves to God. I think part of it includes the ego. Just getting out of the way. It's not going to work if we think we're in charge. Just saying, all right, I've tried it, I've gotten into trouble. I've had my lamp empty when the Christ consciousness came. I'm just going to resign myself to this, which is me and God walking the path together. And then let's see what kind of a life I can have. And then what happens, of course, is that you become a cause, not an effect. And you take the light out into the world and serve others. So you have a life as a devotee, as a disciple of a great master, where you have the possibility of serving God, serving others from within yourself, because you're carrying that Christ light. It's within you, because you have resigned yourself to God. You have made him your companion, him the one you speak to. Thou hast come into my temple at last. The doors of my senses are wide, open wide. The bird of darkness has taken wing. I tune the harp strings of my heart and sing a song of my ages-old love for thee. My song will be newly consumed with the fresh notes of my soul. Wavelets of my song will dance in rhythm within the heaving of the great ocean of cosmic consciousness. Growing to great billows of devotion, they will move steadily to thy shore. O lullaby of all soothing, rising, crashing waves, sing to me the song of my beloved mother, eternity. O anthem of divine love, rock me sonorously in thy cradle of cosmic vibration, and bring all my restless delusions to sleep at last on thy great bosom of peace.